Let me just say good afternoon to everyone. And now I need to tell you, I am a local pastor in the African American church. So I want to start my discourse by saying we believe in call and response. And so what that will mean is a little hand clap or a little yes or something that just lets me know you're not asleep during the presentation. Now, I do have a method for those that fall asleep on me. I just want you to know that as well. Hopefully, I won't be able to use that tonight or this afternoon. All right, so let's get started. I want to first start by giving a huge thank you to Dr. Turner for his vision, really making sure that we are, in the midst of everything else, really acknowledging our faith. You'll hear me talk about that in just a second. To Dr. Monica Rivera Mint, I'm certainly thankful for all of her mentorship as well. And certainly to Dr. Deb Stroman, I want to also use a minute or two of my time. Dr. Turner, I could not have been more prouder on Monday night for Dr. Stroman to acknowledge that faith was important even as they started the conference. And so can we just celebrate just for a moment with a hand clap the role that faith plays in our lives. Now, they didn't give me a crash course on this little clicker. And okay, that's all I needed to hear. Green moves it forward. So let's get started. In my little short time together, we'll be talking about 4 key elements: faith engagement. We'll be talking about this faith engagement model. We'll even dive into a faith activity and show you how it's implemented. And then obviously, we'll conclude our time together with the faith engagement call to action. All right? So when we think of, all right, the role of faith and religion in Black men's brain health. That's what we want to drill down on the next few moments together. I'm not sure where I'm pointing. All right. I want to ground our conversation around a particular piece of a pericope, 3 John 1 and 2. And it says, "Dear friends, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well." And I say this scripture because it has been the anchor scripture for me. I recite this every day because it reminds me of our Heavenly Father's desire for us to be a holistic being. We can benefit health-wise, but we can also benefit spiritual-wise as well. And so you'll hear me talk about that in a second around why it's been important and how it's played into the role of our work. I want to cover a couple of key terms so that we would be on the same page together: faith, religion, faith engagement, faith communities, faith and health, integration, and then lastly, the Black church. All right, so when you talk about faith, basically it's the belief and trust in the loyalty of God or a higher power, the belief in something for which there is no proof. When we talk about religion, I want to drill down, it's basically the belief in and or worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal God. Faith engagement, which you will hear us talk about, is the mobilizing of faith communities to work together with the scientific communities through a comprehensive effort with a shared commitment to discover immediate and long-term needs of the community. I think it's also important to identify when we say faith communities, we're talking about a congregation of believers who share a vision, working collaboratively to address the needs of their community. They come together to worship, pray, learn, and grow together in this same community. And faith and health integration, you'll hear today that's really the bedrock of how these two entities or organizations come together and work collaboratively for the greater good of people. And then lastly, you'll hear some drilling down around this concept of the Black church. All right, so let's talk about the Black church for a moment. That's important for many reasons. As we look at the Black men's brain health, I wanted to try to tie the key components of the success of the work that we've been able to do and how the role the Black church has played in moving the needle forward for the advancement of Black men's health. When we consider the Black church, like I need not sure if the battery is in this good or not, but I want to start with the Black church with a quote. I've been doing this work for 4 decades. I've been doing faith engagement for a long time. And one of the things that I have developed is this quote. The quote says, if you want to address any issue, you must start at the center. And I contend the center for the Black community is the Black church. And when you take that as the basis, you then can understand that the historical role of churches in the Black community is a necessity. I can tell you that the church in the Black community is always been the bedrock, the institutional grounding in the Black community. For many, in my grandmother's era, the church was also the schoolhouse. We also know that the Black church has also been instrumental around pathways to freedom, for example, the Underground Railroad. And then we can also definitively say that the birthplace of resistance in our Black community has always been the Black church. For example, the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., or you can also drill down on the Emancipation Proclamation, which was also levied from the Black church. The takeaway is that the Black church has always been a part of the Black community. I found some Pew Research data which underscored the same thing. So we know that among all the subgroups, that African Americans are 60% more inclined to be in a church or congregation, over and against whites, which are 13%. And the research says, not only that, what was more staggering for me was that out of the participants, 97% of everyone that participated said, and these were all African Americans, by the way, that they believed in God or a higher power. So why is this important, Williams? Because if you're going to do this type of work and connect it to Black men, you have to also know where some of the foundational principles are, I would argue. All right, so let's look also, here's another research paper which really underscores that religion and spirituality has positive benefits in the African American community. So for example, positive emotions, well-being is connected to being religious, hope and optimism, and certainly self-esteem. Let me just say, as a pastor in the African American community, I just did a sermon series entitled, Look Up, Help is on the Way. And what it drilled down in the community congregants was that despite what anyone else says, you are somebody. And it is that level of reinforcement in the African American community that really paves the way for the work that we're going to be talking about in just a second. So as we look at Black church participation. I wanted to talk for a moment. If you're going to be working in the Black church, there are some fundamental principles that should be understood. For example, African Americans have higher levels of religious participation among Blacks than whites. This is, you can see the research paper noted at the bottom, as well as higher levels of religiosity among Blacks, as well as, I wanted to show you that goes right back to my sermon, that support from Black church members is positively associated with a variety of health and mental health issues. So, for example, you use your pulpit to inspire those that you lead, as well as Blacks express greater confidence in religious institutions than do whites. And so when we look at Black participation, I wanted to also just show you that Black churches have been a central institution in civic and spiritual life of the Black communities. We've established that, which may account for Black greater support for political and social activism among religious leaders on social issues. We can use the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a classic example of how the Black church rallied around the political and social issues of that time. And then I want to tell you, when you're dealing with the Black church, that the research says that females are more associated and significantly represented more in Black church participation. Flip that around, what that means is typically Black men are less represented in the Black church for several reasons that we will talk about shortly. But you would need to know that if you're going to work with the Black church, that the masses is going to be seen in Black females. And there is this underlying challenge around Black men and their attendance in the Black church. We know in the South versus the North and the West, that the research is clear that Southerners tend to be more religiously aware in the Black church. We know around things like service attendance, reading religious materials, even perceived importance on taking children to religious services. I say that because even in the church that I pastor, many people migrate from the North back to the South, but in that conversation, they say that when they would come to the South, their grandmothers would make it a mandate for them to attend the worship services in the South as they attended their hometowns. And so these things become very critical around noticing the context around the Black church. Now, I think I went back one, two, let's see. How do you go back? All right. I'll start from here, maybe. Whoa. I don't know how to make this. I don't know. I just didn't. Okay, here we go. All right. No, something is not right on it. Yeah, it's skipping on me though. Okay. All right. Let's talk about faith and research integration. All right. I want to start with a quote as we have this dialogue on how you integrate faith and research. I found this wonderful quote. It says, "Who wants to understand the poem must go to the land of the poetry. Who wishes to understand the poet must go to the poet's land." Now, I said, why was that important? because if you're going to do any work around faith engagement, what we know for sure is this wonderful picture. When you look at this picture, do you draw from it a blended family? I hope so. Let me get some interaction one more time. When you look at this picture, do you draw from it a blended family? Okay, thank you. We're on the same page now. So the reason why I chose this picture is because it has several layers of blendedness. Would you agree? All right. So somebody is saying, Williams, what does this have to do at all with the presentation? Well, let's move forward and just see. I'm trying, Jesus. Okay. All right. So this is I don't know if the banner is Heavenly Father. I hope so. Because I can't. I'm pushing. Y'all can't see it, but I'm pushing. Yeah, forward. Yeah. They don't. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now I got some instructions here. All right. So if you're going to work with the faith community, these are some notes that I have learned over the time that there are 3 tiers of faith. And this is critical if you're going to do any work in the faith community. First of all, the first tier would be historical, where faith is part of our founding history, but is no longer relevant to our mission that we're doing at hand. So you have faith, but it's not interwoven in the work that you do. Then you have mission-based faith, which is faith which is relevant to our mission, but not our projects and activities. So you have the history, you have the mission, and then the ultimate gold standard is central faith. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when you engage the community, if you do not know which level of faith that you're dealing with, it creates some hiccups, and we'll talk about that shortly. Central faith is relevant both to our mission and to the project and activities we undertake. So, why is that important? Because, unfortunately, sometimes the paradigm has been that if we're going to work with faith communities, we just simply stay on lane, and then they stay on their lane. But what we have found in the work that we have been able to move the needle on, if you're going to work with the faith community, identifying and locating faith-based organizations with the capacity and the desire to partner, it involves, first of all, inquiry. Nothing any worse than to partner with the faith community and you don't even know the level of investment that they have in their own community. So some of that has to do with you investigating, inquiring, and making discoveries, but then identifying leaders and congregants of those faith-based organizations requires you also, as the poet says, you want to understand the poet, you got to go to the poet's land. And one of the challenges that I have found is that it's so nice and easy to stay behind a computer. But if you want to move the needle with the Black and marginalized or Black and underrepresented communities, you have to go to where they are. And Connecting with, for example, the story that I always use is a gentleman who had a storefront church. That means he didn't have a building or anything. And the researcher came into the community and asked him, where's the faith leader in the community? But the researcher did not know that the gentleman she was talking to was the gatekeeper to that black community. Yeah, it was a lesson learned. Yeah. So if you're going to work, you have to go to where they are. Some benefits around working with the faith community: they can expand coverage of whatever intervention that you're trying to roll out. They can amplify advocacy. I see this all the time as faith leaders. They can catalyze learning and certainly facilitate cross-sector engagement. These are just a few of the benefits. I want to talk a little bit more around why it's a benefit to engage the black community, and more specifically, the black church. Experience has shown that many things are positive and possible when system partners work together with faith-based groups. For example, asset-based collaboration. That is one big lesson learned that I have learned in my years of working with this faith engagement model. Also, bi-directional trust building. It's not unilateral undertaking. So, for example, the faith leader and the faith community has to come to the table with some trust building, but also the institution, the academic researcher has to come to the table with a certain level of trust building as well. It's not automatically given, as many may think. And then I want to talk about some assets. So I talked with some pastors just this week, and I was sharing with them that many times pastors don't realize all the assets that they have. I just want to speak for a moment to pastors, whether here or online, and to say to you, there are many assets that you have. Can I tell you a few that I have learned to put in writing? For example, spaces of gathering. I worked on a research project that required community spaces. So what better way to leverage the asset than to partner with the faith community who has already a building? It just makes sense, correct? Or no? All right. And so interested and influential leaders, my friends, let me digress and say I was at a service with a researcher, and the researcher did not realize the influence that the leader had. So while the researcher was talking, the leader was over in the corner playing with the grandbaby. But what the researcher didn't understand was that the leader was also being watched by the congregants. And the very fact that the leader was uninterested was a huge hiccup in their presentation. So they have a little debriefing, and they did not tell the minister what they were doing. They had a connection with somebody else and got the appointment. So then when the minister understood the appointment, the minister invited them back. And this time they got a standing ovation. Somebody say, why? It was because of the influence of the leader. And when you realize that, you make sure that you don't overstep that one. Listen, congregational health ambassadors, you'd be surprised at the number of churches and faith leaders who have persons already designated in their congregations who are nurses, doctors, PhDs, as well as, just regular congregants as well. Church vehicles, all these are assets. Walking trails, parking lots. One of the things we're pushing faith leaders now is to turn your parking lot into a walking trail. Allow your congregants to come 30 minutes early and walk in the parking lot, or stay 30 minutes after, because what we're saying is, all these are contributors to better health outcomes. And then we share with faith leaders that the academic community has resources as well, resources around grants and things, information around health topics, There are networks in the Maya Angelou Center. I love it when Dr. Bird talks about not only do we have resources inside the Maya Angelou Center, but we have over 150 faculty affiliates. So to the faith leader, what it says to you is if you need a cardiologist, we have faculty affiliates that could forward that conversation for you. So not only that, we also have grants that we can participate. A couple more benefits, and we'll get to the model itself. One of the other benefits of working with the Black church is you get better decision making by having them at the table and not on the table. You also have more effective service delivery by involving them as well in the design and possibly also in the delivery of services. You have greater community support by excuse me, obtaining the cooperation and the active support of the community programs. This will also further the engagement with our community. And then lastly, community development. So these are some of the benefits. I found an article here that I wanted to share around benefits because sometimes people might not know just the plethora of benefits in working with the faith community. For example, this person says, helping others and sharing information with others. The person said, who was a faith leader, by the way, that I gave information that might help other people. Not only that, knowledge, awareness, and or information about a colonoscopy. This particular person was talking about in general health, talking about it. Listen to their response. They said, I got the understanding about colonoscopy, the purpose of having it. It did me a lot of good. I'm educated about it. And so these are some of the benefits when you bring both parties to the table. Proud of participating and completing a study. The fact that I participated, I cannot tell you across this country the number of people in the Black church who many say are the hardest group to recruit. It's all about the methodology and the trustworthiness when you engage that conversation. And so here's another example. Interacting with trusted researchers can help build confidence in individuals who doubt themselves and their abilities to contribute to research in meaningful ways. These are other ways that faith leaders could identify scientists, is what I was saying before, within their congregations who would be willing to lead parishioners in a project with trusted researchers as well. And then another benefit would be faith communities often recruit parishioners who are individuals with experience in organizing events. Why not recruit scientists to help address perceived conflicts between science and faith, or to lead projects that require scientific expertise? These are just some of the ways that we can move the conversation forward. But as I move towards this model, which is, I'm sure, the real caveat of this presentation, I could not move there without talking about there's some hurdles over these years going across state to state. I have comprised what I call some lessons learned around faith engagement. And that's what I want to give you. If you're going to be engaging the Black church to help improve the health of Black men, there are some things that you should certainly know about. First of all, in engaging the faith engagement is possibly the most complex and labor-intensive responsibility that partners take on. Listen to this. This is partly because community partnership and participation is not a one-off, time-limited, but an ongoing commitment. In other words, one of the big hurdles is this concept called the helicopter concept, where you go in, get your data, and then you leave without any returning of the results from the same people. One of the things that I try to say is, if you're going to do this work, this is one of my most important slides, because it's how do you stay off landmines when you're working with this blended family. So you have researchers on one side and then the faith community on the other side. So there are things that, for example, you'll hear me talk about shortly, is when you're working with faith leaders, I just say there are some things that the institution will not allow. You have to be clear about the expectations. And then on the other side, the pastor says, researcher, I appreciate your offer, but there are some things that we won't be able to participate in. And to know those two is what keeps you off the landmine. You see that picture on the left, that explosion. That's what you want to avoid. Let me, this is my most important slide. Yeah. I've seen that blow up, and it's not a good feeling, all right? So let's talk about things that will cause it to blow up. If you walk into a room and as the researcher, you come in with a deficit mindset. I have been going over this country talking about this because it's a huge turnoff to faith leaders. That if you walk in the room and say that I have a research project and I'm going to fix you and your congregation, and at the end, you all are going to be better. My friends, we need a paradigm shift. Because what happens is that it's a turnoff because you do not acknowledge that the faith community have assets. So what good is a project if you don't have participants? What good is a pastor without the congregation? What good is a teacher without? So you have to have this blended family concept. But the asset-based concept says we come into the room and both of us are at the table and both of us will benefit from the partnership. If there's anything else I could talk to the emerging scholars, may you use this slide as a guiding principle that it doesn't matter until you get their trust. All right, let's move a little bit further. Some other barriers are assuming trust is mutual, blurred boundary line, that's what we were talking about before, literature, marketing, comprehension levels, budget for the community engagement. Nothing any worse than going to the black church. I just want to be real. I just had this happen, and a researcher wanted to use the church and the congregants, and the member said, Pastor, like, what's in this for us? Somebody should take note on that one. And then past practices and institutional history. And this is the one that in the black church, you have to be transparent. And I want to give this as an example. I had a researcher, this just happened in 2023, walk into a Kwanzaa event. If you know anything about Kwanzaa, that's a black religious event. And the researcher walks in and says these words. Now, I know y'all know about Tuskegee, but I want y'all, it's time now to get over that. Mm-hmm. You can give the benediction because that program was over that night. Yeah. When you're doing community work, you cannot hide your institution's history. Because these, let me see, these little smartphones, I have learned also as a pastor that when you do your sermons, make sure that your facts are straight because people be fact checking you right while you're preaching. And while we're giving our community talks, people are fact checking us. And I want to move on to my next slide. But for example, in our institution at Wake Forest University School of Medicine, we participated in eugenics. And I had legislators who went to the State House to legislate against making it a crime to sterilize someone. And Wake Forest was at the top of the line for eugenics. Just study it. The reason why I said that is because I was in a program and a black gentleman raised his hand and he said, what's your position on your institution's history? All right, that's enough of that. it's better not to have an aha moment. It's better to go ahead on and grab that bull by the horn and let's tackle that fella and say, now we can have a conversation. All right. I bring this up because here is the Defense Secretary, Lord Austin, who he was asked to testify before lawmakers. You may remember seeing this. Black men. Why is this slide important? Because another barrier is the stigma that is attached to black men when we talk about our health. We just heard this from the other presenters earlier. And I found it stunning that the Defense Secretary said he got a gut punch because he had a diagnosis that he was not prepared for. And do you know, he was a representation of what happens in black men. Even at the highest level, he could not just grasp the thought of having a conversation around a bad diagnosis. And so it's a barrier when you go into these communities of color, because we know for sure that it's not well talked about. You know, we're still working through that. I found a case study for you. I wanted to just use this as a quick guide. If you're going into the black communities, one of the things that we have to do is to create dialogue. Everybody say dialogue. All right, that was okay for 1/3 of it. Everybody say dialogue. Yeah, that's right. My call and response. I like that one better. Dialogue is critical, and here are a few ways that you can create dialogue if you're going to work in these black communities. For example, research is a big deal. I was just on a call this week, and we were trying to galvanize some pastors around, improving their health. Black men is what we were trying to focus on. And do you know the number one question was research? And they kept going back. Several pastors were going back and forth around research. And you have to use your influence as a faith leader to talk about if we don't get involved. That's the other side of research. Look, I just want to read two of these. On the research, they said lack of trust and the personal touch between the researcher and the participant are barriers to participation. So, for example, there's some things that you can't manufacture. Would you agree with that? That if you walk in a room, some people just have the it factor. Would you agree with that? And then some people have to struggle with it. I'm a pastor. I see this all the time. You see people in a room that some people just have that, what we call that outgoing experience. They can almost sell a shirt off a homeless man. They just have that gift, right? And then other of us have to work at it, right? So what I'm trying to say is, when you're in these communities, you have to be authentic and actually express your humanism. It's okay to be human, even in research. All right. And then the other one is number 4, understanding the benefit of participation in research increases chances of participation with or without. All right. So what that's saying is, when you increase understanding, and that's the goal, is to ultimately go into the community, go into the church, and to be able to say, I want to increase your understanding. And what we'll find is sometimes people will participate with no respect to compensation, because for some it's altruistic. They want, for me, I use this as an example. When I go and I do talks around getting involved, I say that altruistically, I do this work for a little guy named Little Boss Man. He's 2 years old, and he's my grandson. All right? So it doesn't matter about the funds. It doesn't matter about the compensation. The goal for me is, if I close my eyes and sleep, I will have made enough contributions to hopefully make his life just a little bit easier and better. Is that okay? All right. So that's, I want to talk about now the model. And this is what I've been trying to get to the whole time. This model around faith engagement. This is a slide around the Triad Pastors Network. It's based out of Wake Forest University School of Medicine at the Maya Angelou Center for Health Equity. Dr. Goldie S. Bird is the center director. This is a formalized agreement with some 100 African American Black pastors across North Carolina. We've been working for over 5 years trying to build this organization, and you can see some of the pillars: co-creation, equality, shared governance. I'll show you a slide in a second around some infrastructure. Culturally centered, bi-directional exchange of information. And what I want you to get from this is this organization has 3 tiers. It has 100 members, and they're all Black, and they're all pastors. And then the tier 2 is this group of people you see in these 2 slides here. They are called the Triad Pastors Ecclesiastical Advisory Council, made up of about some 27 faith leaders. They provide the governance for the Triad Pastors Network. And then the 3rd tier is the Congregational Health Ambassadors, which becomes the go-between between the center and the local pastors. I can tell you that this TPN, we've done a lot of surveys with them, and just look at some of the things that these pastors say are important to them. Heart disease, diabetes, kidneys disease, Alzheimer's, mental health, and the list just goes on. Why is this important? Because if you're going to work with their community, isn't it better to know what their desires are? They're more, and let me say it another way. You can move the train faster when you get the endorsement from the faith leader. All right, that's enough of that. Another initiative from the Triad Pastors Network is the Black Men's Health Forum. We focused 6 weeks on 6 sessions for Black men. We had, as you can see, Dr. Thorpe was one of our key speakers as well. We focus on things from Black men and Black men's masculinity, and boy, was that a conversation, and health and coping strategies, sexual health, cancer, cardiovascular, and then brain health and healthy aging. Why is all this important? Because these were some survey items that we got from the TPN on the importance of what mattered to Black men. It was very unique because on the right in this screen, you see these purple or pink little arrows. We decided that in the study, we would also give the male accountability partner, because what we found was if the male had someone who would give some accountability to their health, it moved the health conversation just a little bit faster. So we said that a health accountability partner could be your wife, your sister, your daughter, your significant other. It didn't matter to us, whoever that significant partner was. And then what we found was these men completed this 6 weeks session with some incredible sustainability. We contributed it to the accountability partners. You can see in this particular screen that these men were asked to self-evaluate themselves, and 30% of them felt like their health was good. That's only 30%. You can see the problem just screaming out in front of us. Another event that we had was a Black men's prayer breakfast in rural America. Why I'm showing you all these is because the model works whether you're in the inner city or whether you're in rural America. Now, this slide is in rural America. It is a tier 1 county, which means it's one of the poorest counties in North Carolina. But you can see that we had men's prayer breakfast there, and what I wanted to get to was the purpose was to raise awareness of health issues affecting African American men and health research, and link men to healthier resources. 153 black men in rural America. When I tell you, my friend, it was unprecedented. And there's another chart I need to show you. You can see the rural counties there as well. But this is the one that I wanted to look at. Look at the blue. When I tell you that working with the black church is tied directly to the influence of the faith leader. 60% of the people that attended said that they attended because of their faith leader. All right. You can see the speakers for that Rural America event as well. Then we tested it across the state to see just how influential it would be through the black church. This was a statewide Alzheimer's town hall, virtual. My friends, 35,000 people on a call. But the man on the far right, down in the corner, he was a faith leader, a pastor, and then also president of the NAACP. Again, if you know the influence of the faith leader, you can move the needle. All right. I want to talk briefly about another study out of Wake Forest. Huge shout out to Dr. Laura Baker. I worked with them on the U.S. Pointer study, and this study focused on two interventions, but the takeaway from this slide was when I came on the team, they were sitting around 14% people of color. And when the study was over, I took the faith engagement model and I applied it to the recruitment for the U.S. Pointer. When the study was over, we ended up with 29% people of color. But we did it through the mechanism of the faith engagement model. All right. Here's some brief examples as well around, this is in rural America. We used a food drive. There were 200 cars at this event. And the reason why this is about the blended family, 100 people agreed to sign up for an Alzheimer's study as a result of the food drive. In the black church, we use the black church as the mechanism to make that happen. Let me show you another one. We also did Purple Sunday. I'm trying to inspire some opportunities for persons on ways that you can engage the black church. We did a Purple Sunday service, and you can see there, we had 50 people in that service that Sunday sign up for an Alzheimer's study. In that service, that's my church members, some of them in the top right up there. All right, then we did a community give back because the church, we wanted to make sure that we provided a space for our community to be able to say, listen, we don't just want to take, but we want to give. We had 500 cars. You can see the lines. As a matter of fact, it was so successful at the church that the sheriff brought 4 sheriff cars and said, Reverend, we got to do something about this now. I said, you can just help get them off the street for me, Sheriff. We be fine. 500 cars. Are you ready for this? 150 people signed up for an Alzheimer's study and the registry. Oh, yes. There's evidence that if you do it and do it right, there is positive outcomes. Now, these are some more pictures around that, but wanted to include with this one right here. We also, you heard Dr. Turner, he was very modest in his explanation of it. We took the black church and paired it with researchers, the Maya Angelou Center, and we had a black men's prayer breakfast. And in that prayer breakfast, it was all men. 300 black men. And then the beauty of it is hundreds of them signed up for the registry. I could not have been happier. We have a North Carolina State Brain Registry as well. And so let's look at some of the results. Dr. Turner was our keynote speaker, and you can see some of the other participants. I want to get to this other slide right here. You can see once again, 56 said that they heard about it from their faith leader. So what we did is we asked every pastor in this little steering committee to commit to several black males that they would bring to the table. Can I give you a secret? We had 20 tables and we asked 20 pastors to adopt a table apiece. Trying to help somebody. You're trying to wonder how this works. I'm giving you some logistics around it, all right? But here's the one that I thought was so phenomenal. We asked the question, can the Maya Angelou Center for Health Equity contact you in the future with information on health events? 159 people said, contact me with more follow-up information. Would you just clap your hands? Listen, that's phenomenal, because what it said was we had won their trust. How many people, I got a little button on my smartphone when somebody calls me and I don't want to talk to them, I just slide that button and yeah. 159 people said, contact me. It was incredible. We had wonderful keynote speaker. I mean, but this is the slide I wanted to end on right here, because in that prayer breakfast, we had 3 black doctors. And these doctors allowed us to talk about anything we wanted. No co-pays, no charges, no invoices, no nothing. You can just walk right to the mic and ask your question. I'm telling you, it was a game changer. Yeah. All right. So I got to move. We gave out some awards. We gave out some prizes. This book from a certain famous person. Here's the keynote speaker. And this is what faith engagement looks like at the end of that program. I want to ask now in my closing moments, what is the call of action? So the call of action is there are many things that we can do. We can ask faith leaders to commit to work with trusted researchers and talk and become spokespersons. We can ask faith leaders, these are some takeaways that you can have to engage the Black church. Faith leaders agreeing to become faith ambassadors, or faith leaders can join trusted researchers to be policy advocates. How about faith leaders working with researchers to review and edit marketing materials? That's a big one as well, because you want your material to be relevant to the people you're reaching out to. Faith leaders can insist the researchers, clinic leads, and community coordinators have cultural sensitivity training regularly before engaging their communities. These are things that faith leaders can do. Faith leaders can promote access to their networks with trusted researchers, and they can distribute educational material. Additionally, what I'd like to close by saying is that the faith leader can create health moments in their services where you invite a researcher to come in and talk about the importance of health promotions and research participation. You can also create health ministries. If you do not have a health ministry, we can certainly work towards making that. And a big one in the Black church is when you have a health ministry, having the faith leader have the health ministry leaders to stand and you affirm them in front of your congregation. It is massive validation as well. And then finally, as I said before, you can have some level of a health moment. We've learned that the Black church is not monolithic. If you're going to work with the Black church, it's not a one and done. Each church has its own particular boundaries that you have to respect. As I take away today, again, Keep in mind the Black church and the researchers are working towards this blended family, as well as faith and religion are highly rated in the Black community. Listening on both sides, that's a big takeaway from today. And then this partnership requires funding and investments, and it is bidirectional, as we talked about before, requires cultural awareness, humility, and fit sensitivity. Remember your histories, barriers, and accessibility and openness. And then this partnership requires investment in the communities of interest. It might get tense, is my closing words, but that could be a good thing. It might get tense in this partnership, but that could be a good thing. Women are great advocates for programming. And lastly, this partnership requires trust, trustworthiness, and it goes on both sides. That's all I have for you. I'd be glad to talk more about it later. If you're interested more in this health and faith partnership, I'll certainly be able to do that as well. Again, we are all in this together. And as I close my session today, we're better when we do it together. All right? Thank you for your time.